Our second reading is Acts 10. Our lectionary had a short 2 lines that didn't make a lot of sense out of context. So bear with me as I provide context. In Caesarea, there was a man named Cornelius, a centurion of the Italian cohort, as it was called. He was a devout man who feared God with all his household. He gave alms generously to the people and prayed constantly to God. One afternoon at about 3 o'clock, he had a vision in which he clearly saw an angel of God coming in and saying to him, "Cornelius." He stared at him in terror and said, "What is it, Lord?" He answered, "Your prayers and your alms have ascended as a memorial before God. Now send men to Joppa for a certain Simon who is called Peter. He is lodging with Simon a tanner whose house is by the seaside." When the angel who spoke to him had left, he called 2 of his slaves and a devout soldier from the ranks of those who served him, and after telling them everything, he sent them to Joppa. About noon the next day, as they were on their journey and approaching the city, Peter went up onto the roof to pray. He became hungry and wanted something to eat, and while it was being prepared, he fell into a trance. He saw the heavens opened and something like a large sheet coming down, being lowered to the ground by its 4 corners. In it were all kinds of 4-footed creatures and reptiles and birds of the air. Then he heard a voice saying, "Get up, Peter, kill and eat." But Peter said, "By no means, Lord, for I have never eaten anything that is profane or unclean." The voice said to him again a second time, "What God has made clean, you must not call profane." This happened 3 times, and the thing was suddenly taken up to heaven. Now, while Peter was greatly puzzled about what to make of the vision that he had seen, suddenly the men sent by Cornelius appeared. They were asking for Simon's house and were standing by the gate. They called out to ask whether Simon, who was called Peter, was staying there. While Peter was still thinking about the vision, the Spirit said to him, "Look, 3 men are searching for you. Now get up, go down, and go with them without hesitation, for I have sent them." So Peter went down to the men and said, "I am the one you are looking for. What is the reason for your coming?" They answered, "Cornelius, a centurion, and righteous and God-fearing man who is well spoken of by the whole Jewish people, was directed by a holy angel to send for you to come to his house and to hear what you have to say." So Peter invited them in and gave them lodging. The next day he got up and went with them, and some of the brothers and sisters from Joppa accompanied him. The following day they came to Caesarea. Cornelius was expecting them and had called together his relatives and close friends. On Peter's arrival, Cornelius met him and, falling at his feet, worshipped him. But Peter made him get up, saying, "Stand up. I am only a mortal." And as he talked with him, he went in and found that many had assembled. And he said to them, "You yourselves know that it is improper for a Jew to associate or to visit an outsider. But God has shown me that I should not call anyone profane or unclean. So when I was sent for, I came without objection. Now may I ask you why you sent for me?" Cornelius replied, 4 days ago at this very hour, at 3 o'clock, I was praying in my house when suddenly a man in dazzling clothes stood before me. He said, "Cornelius, your prayer has been heard and your alms have been remembered before God. Send therefore to Joppa and ask for Simon, who is called Peter. He is staying in the home of Simon, a tanner by the sea. Therefore I sent for you immediately, and you have been kind enough to come." So now all of us are here in the presence of God to listen to all that the Lord has commanded you to say. And so my sermon is it really about the food? Because so often when I was growing up, I heard, because I wondered as I was reading the Hebrew Bible, there's this really long list of food that you can eat and food that you can't eat. And we were eating a lot of the food that we were not supposed to eat, mainly pork, because it's just wonderful. I mean, it just really is. But I asked, why is it when the Bible says we're not supposed to eat pork? And, I was in Cajun country, so a lot of that stuff, there was a whole lot more we were eating, that's on the forbidden list. You're not supposed to eat crawfish or any shellfish. And we were eating an awful lot of that too. And what I heard was, well, Peter's vision erases that part of the law. I thought, okay, all right. Don't call unclean or profane what God has made clean. But then I went back and reread it, because that was the only real section of those 618 laws in the Hebrew Bible that, we talked about, well, those don't count. But there are a whole lot of laws that have to do with human interactions. And as I sat and read the entire passage, all of Acts, I realized this vision of food was a means by which Peter understood humans aren't clean or unclean either. In the beginning, God created us and we were good. We are created in the image of God. We are called to live in covenant with one another and in covenant with God. We're brothers and sisters, beloved children of God. And yet, every generation, we have folks that we somehow, well, not them, of course. So we look in the Hebrew Bible and you have the Moabites, forever hated of the Jewish people and forever hated by God. And all of a sudden the table opens up because Ruth the Moabite marries Boaz through an interesting turn of events that has to do with uncovering feet. And she, the Moabite, becomes the ancestor of David and the ancestor of Jesus. The Samaritans, the most despised people of the time period. The people that were unclean, untouchable. All of a sudden, Jesus, when he's trying to make his point about relationships and how we should treat one another and how we should care for one another, picked the most extreme example of someone on the outside and tells the people, you should be as good as he is. And it was shocking to the people. Every generation has, unfortunately, those people that we treat as profane and unclean, that we somehow envision as outside of God's love and care, that it's okay for us to set aside and despise. And generation after generation, we're reminded we're all God's children. We are not to call profane that which God has made clean. Part of our growth in spirituality is looking at our text and saying, what was this text then? What lesson did those people gain from this peace? And then we turn around and then say, and what are we today to gain when we open up this text? I think we sometimes get sidetracked by the details instead of zeroing in and saying, but what is the underlying message? The food is not clean or unclean. The food is a gift from God. And so are we. Because somewhere out there, someone is talking about us as the profane and unclean ones. Somewhere out on the planet. You know, we're the bad guys in somebody's story. And somebody is the bad guy in our story. But Jesus calls us to love. We're to love God. We're to love our neighbors. We're to love ourselves. We're to love our enemies. Well, that one's hard, right? We're to love our enemies. And we're to love as Christ loved. That is expansive of all of us, right? He doesn't leave anybody out in that. Can we live into that? Can we take that deep breath and when we're telling stories, recognize all of us are children of God, and yes, we all screw up. Because haven't we? You know, haven't I? I certainly have failed to live into the fullness of what God is calling me to be. I hope I'm doing better now than when I was on the playground in 4th grade, or when I was starting college, or all of those missteps and mess ups and ungracious moments. Because I can look at my own history and say, man, there's a whole list of things I wish I could do over. There are people that I hurt, most of them unintentionally, but there's a little boy in 4th grade. You know, no, I really meant that. And I shouldn't have. Right? All of us have fallen short of the glory that is God. All of us have messed up. I hope I receive grace for the times I've messed up. And I hope we can extend grace to those that have hurt us. That we can remember that we are all God's. And that we can love with that knowledge. That we can heal. And that we can build something new. That we can build something healthier. Because all of us have work to do of one form or another. And part of that is going back to these texts and asking ourselves, who are our Moabites? Who are the people that we think we could never love and that nobody could ever love? Who are our Samaritans? Not the good Samaritan, the normal Samaritans, who also were good, right? That was Jesus' point. These folks are not the monsters you think they are. You should be as good as them, right? So who are our Moabites and who are our Samaritans? Can we, with love, welcome them? And can we accept their welcome when they welcome us? Because that's what Peter did. It's not really about the food. It's about the relationship. Can we heal our relationships? This morning in Bible school, we're reading a passage, John 14, where John, in that passage, is telling of when Jesus is reassuring the disciples and telling them, I will come again. But you know what? You know the way to go. You have what you need to do what I have done and to do even more than I have done. If that's the case, if we know what we're supposed to do, and Jesus is expecting us to do it, to do what he has done and even more so, why haven't we? Jesus healed communities and he healed individuals and he brought people together. Is that what he's calling us to do? If that's the case, what do we need to do to accomplish what he's calling us to do? And it all starts in love, and to recognize those people, whoever those people are, and every generation has a different those people. You know, my father-in-law was World War II era and military, and he hated Germans, right? The irony is he married a German. I don't think she told him she was German until after the fact, right? As we all know, you know, this being a Germanic community, there are really a lot of good Germans, right? He had to let that one go so he could have a loving, healthy relationship with his wife. Every generation has the bad guys. But in Christ, there is no east or west. There is no us versus them. They're just God's children to love. I pray as we go through our lives, we heal ourselves and love ourselves. We heal our families. Because so often the mess is right there in the family. We're human. I pray that we can heal that we can heal our communities and extend that healing to the world. Because what Christ did, we are called to do also. May it be so.